So, you've arrived in the US and you're already a licensed clinical psychologist in your home country. Naturally, you'd like to continue practicing your career in the States, but as you start applying to jobs, you realize that even though you can legally work in the US, you cannot work as a clinical psychologist right away because you need a license. That said, everyone needs money to live and time doesn't stand still, so you decide to take a job outside of your field. Even though you're making enough money to get by, you're not using your hard-earned training and skills. But there's good news. If you were trained as a clinical psychologist in a foreign country, it is possible for you to validate the education you already have, get licensed, and start practicing in the US. The accreditation process might seem overwhelming, so in this video, we will explain the steps you can take to get licensed in your field. Why would I get licensed in the US, you might be wondering? When you became a psychologist, it was probably because you wanted to help other people, or maybe it was because you were fascinated by the human mind. No matter what your motivations were, it turns out that clinical psychologists can make impressive salaries depending on what state they work in. In Massachusetts, for instance, the average annual income of a clinical psychologist is $107,000 a year, according to Indeed.com. In New York, the income is estimated to be even higher at more than $125,000 a year. While in many cases working as a clinical psychologist means directly providing therapy to patients, there's an abundance of other job opportunities your career path could open up in the US. Clinical psychologists can find jobs working in schools, mental health clinics, hospitals, as researchers, and even as consultants for businesses and government agencies. So, even if you want to take your career in another direction, getting licensed will allow you to earn an above-average salary while you keep building on the career you've already started. By using the degree you already have, you'll be one step closer to your goal and avoid having to pay for school again. So, who will grant your clinical psychologist license? A well-trained clinical psychologist can dramatically transform the lives of their patients through effective therapy. And when patients visit their clinical psychologist, they need to share deeply personal information to make progress. So it makes sense that in the United States, clinical psychologists need to be licensed to legally practice. But the question remains, who actually grants these licenses? Even though there are national organizations like the American Psychological Association and the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards, licensing is controlled by each individual state. For example, if you want to practice psychology in California, you'll need to obtain your license through the California Board of Psychology. On the other hand, to practice in Texas, you'll need to be licensed by the Texas Behavioral Health Executive Council. Usually, each state psychology board is made up of between 8 and 10 people who are psychologists, lawyers, educators, or state politicians. These board members are typically appointed to their positions by their state's governor or another state politician and serve terms of 3 to 6 years. The reason there are professionals appointed to state psychology boards from multiple disciplines is that psychologists have an effect on more than just their patients. In reality, psychology research and practice can impact public policy, education, healthcare, and the legal system. Now that we understand the specifics of a psychology state licensing board, let's get a closer look at how to get in touch with your particular state's licensing board. Considering that each state has its own licensing board, you may be confused as to how to contact them. Luckily, the ASPPB has created an online directory of each state's board, which includes their website, physical address, phone number, and email. We will include the link to the directory in the description. You might feel the urge to contact your state psychology board by giving them a call if you have a quick question or you urgently want an answer. While a phone call is okay in some circumstances, state psychology boards usually prefer that you contact them through email. Let's go over some tips for emailing your state licensing board. For starters, if English isn't your first language, you can compose your email in your native language and then translate it for clarity. We can assist with professional translations if needed. Then, even though it may seem obvious, make sure to include as much information as possible in your email when you send it. In the subject line, indicate if your email is urgent and add 1 or 2 words explaining what your email is about. For example, you might write licensing guidance for a Japanese psychologist with 10 years experience. In the body of your email, be sure to provide your full name, your phone, and your email address. Basically, you want to make it as easy as possible for the licensing board to respond to you. One last step to keep in mind is the time and day to contact your licensing board. Most state licensing boards operate during the daytime between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. So if you email or call the board when they're out of the office, they probably won't answer. And finally, remember, the United States has multiple time zones. For example, there's a 3-hour difference between New York and California. So you might want to look up what time it is in the state you're contacting. We will include the website, phone numbers, and email or contact form for the state licensing boards of California, Florida, Illinois, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, and Texas in the description below. Pay special attention to the links for California, Illinois, New York, and Texas. These state licensing boards utilize an online contact form rather than an email address. However, when you receive your response, it will be through your email. Now we're going to look at how to get your credentials evaluated to practice clinical psychology. In the United States, you will need an equivalent to a doctoral degree in psychology. The two most common doctoral degrees for clinical psychologists are the Doctor of Philosophy, known as a PhD, and the Doctor of Psychology, known as a PsyD. One of the most important steps in obtaining your psychology license in the U.S. is getting your educational and professional experience evaluated. Credential evaluations are so important because degrees have different names from one country to another. For example, you might have earned a doctorate in clinical psychology from France, but you don't know if you can use that degree to practice psychology in the United States. Understanding the requirements for obtaining a psychology license can be a bit tricky, especially when it comes to the number of supervised clinical hours needed. Each state in the U.S. has its own criteria. For instance, to practice in New York, you'll need to complete a minimum of 3,500 supervised hours over 2 years, while Florida requires 4,000 hours. With these variables in mind, it's smart to contact the licensing board of the state you wish to work in and request a list of credential evaluation services they recommend. In some cases, you can even find a list online. For example, Illinois, New York, and California each provide a list of recommended credential evaluation services. We'll include the links to those lists in the description below as well. Clinical psychology is a prestigious career path, so your credential evaluation will need to be comprehensive. In general, you can expect a credential evaluation company to ask you for official sets of your academic record, which may include transcripts, report cards, and examination statements. You'll also need to provide documentation of your internships and licenses from your home country. And be aware that credential evaluation companies require English translations of any documents not issued in English. These translations must be completed by a professional translation service. I'll explain the translation process a bit later. Bear in mind that the evaluation process can take a few weeks, but expedited services are often available for an additional fee. Evaluating a doctoral degree usually requires more time and may cost between $300 and $500. One last thing to consider is that these agencies can usually send the evaluation directly to the psychology board in the state you want to work in. In some cases, this may be the best option because sometimes the licensing board may require that the evaluation and translation come directly from the evaluation or translation agencies to ensure the document's authenticity. Now let's get back to certified translations. One of the most important things to keep in mind is that even if your English is perfect, you cannot translate your documents yourself. That said, typically evaluation agencies provide you with various options depending on whether you're going to have your documents translated in the US or abroad. Be sure to check with the evaluation agency because they may have certain requirements. Some evaluation agencies may even offer translation services for a fee. However, since we at U.S. Language Services specialize in translation, our rates are usually far more competitive and can be as much as 50% less than what evaluation agencies charge. Also, if the agency or the board requires that the translation be sent directly to them, we're happy to do so. It's important to understand that certified translations do not indicate the direct correspondence between a degree obtained abroad and its equivalent in the U.S. Certified translations simply put the documentation in English so that you can send it and the evaluation agency or licensing board can review your academic and professional accreditations in English. Certified translations do not change the value of a grade obtained. For example, if you obtained a 10 in a subject in a country where it is numerically evaluated out of 10, the certified translation will indicate that you have obtained a 10, not an A+. In addition to any document required for the credential evaluation process, you may want to have any letters of recommendation or certificates of work experience translated for future job applications. To obtain a certified translation from U.S. Language Services, you can place your order through our website or request a quote. You can simply send us scanned copies or even photographs of them. It's not necessary to send the physical documents for this part of the process. You will find the corresponding links in the description. Now we'll discuss how to demonstrate your level of English proficiency. If you're hoping to start a career as a clinical psychologist in the U.S., it's vital that you can prove your English reading and speaking abilities. Whether you become a research psychologist for an organization or work with patients in a clinical setting, strong English skills will allow you to build trust with potential employers or clients. Two of the most widely recognized exams people use to demonstrate their English proficiency are the Test of English as a Foreign Language and the International English Language Testing System. Both of these exams allow you to prove your proficiency in English and may help you land a job after you get your license. We'll now go over the exams that you need to take to obtain your license. One thing that's consistent across virtually every state in the US is that you'll need to take the examination for professional practice in psychology, which most people in the psychology community informally refer to as the EPPP. This exam is administered by the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards, which operates in the US and Canada. In addition to the national exam, some individual states may require you to take an exam that's tailored to their specific laws and practices. But let's discuss the EPPP first. The test is computer-based and is made up of 225 multiple-choice questions. You'll have 4 hours and 15 minutes to finish, and you'll be aiming for a score of 500 or higher, which is about 70% of the questions. Each question offers 4 choices with only one correct answer. The good news is, incorrect answers don't count against you, so guessing won't hurt your score. Your total number of correct responses determines your score, so it's wise to guess even if you're not sure. The EPPP is divided into 2 parts. Part 1 covers biological bases of behavior, cognitive affective bases of behavior, social bases of behavior, and lifespan development. Part 1 also goes over psychological assessment as well as treatment and intervention. Part 2 presents test takers with clinical scenarios and asks them to apply their knowledge and skills to analyze and solve problems. This part of the exam is designed to assess your ability to integrate and apply psychological principles in clinical settings. The exam fee is $450 with possible additional state fees. You'll also probably need to pay a $65 fee when you schedule with your local testing center. After you finish the EPPP, your score will automatically be registered in the ASPPB's permanent record system. However, you may need to wait up to 10 business days before you can see the score posted online. After your score has been posted online, you'll need to formally request to have your score transferred to the state licensing board where you're seeking licensure. If you decide to go with the standard EPPP score transfer service, it will probably take about 4 weeks for the ASPPB to send your score. However, the ASPPB offers an expedited service for $115, in which case they'll send your score to the state's licensing board within 5 days after receiving your request. If you score below 500, you'll receive an exam feedback report detailing performance in each domain to guide your study focus. If you don't pass, you'll need to contact your state's licensing board to see when you can retake the exam. While there are a variety of EPPP study books and apps to download, a book called the EPPP Step 1 Exam Review is highly ranked among folks who've already taken and passed the exam. The study guide provides test-taking tips as well as 450 practice questions. We'll include a link to the study guide in the description below. Another company offering study materials for the EPPP is called Mometrics. For starters, you'll see that Mometrics sells a large study guide on Amazon, but if you take a deeper dive into the company's resources, you'll find a separate flashcard system for sale. Beyond these physical resources, Mometrics offers an array of YouTube instructional videos and an online practice test. If you're looking for a thorough online test prep, you can also visit study.com/EPPP, which offers over 1,000 practice questions and more than 200 video lessons, all for a monthly subscription fee. However, study.com also offers a free mobile app with what feels like an endless amount of resources. After downloading the app, simply search EPPP and you'll find 38 chapters. Each chapter offers between 3 and 10 video lessons and a free chapter practice test at the end of the section. The Study.com app is one of the most extensive free resources you'll find online. Another great resource is an online forum hosted by the Student Doctor Network, and we'll leave the link in the description box as well. You can also search Facebook for groups of other people who are studying for the EPPP. We'll include links to a couple Facebook forums in the description box, and the great thing about them is that many of them screen their members. So after requesting to join, you'll be able to chat directly with other people who are studying for the EPPP. Now, let's take a look at the individual state exams. Besides the EPPP, many states have their own specific exam for aspiring clinical psychologists. The great thing is these state exams are often much shorter. The purpose of these exams is to ensure clinical psychologists understand the unique laws governing each state. Through a quick search online, you can usually look up the names of these exams very easily, but let's take a look at a few. In California, aspiring clinical psychologists will take the California Psychology Law and Ethics Examination, or CPLEE. This is a timed test with 100 multiple choice questions, and candidates typically have 2 hours and 15 minutes to complete it. In Texas, you'll need to take the Texas Jurisprudence exam. This is a 50-question test, and you need to answer at least 75% correctly, which is about 38 questions to pass. Candidates will have 3 attempts to pass the exam. For Florida, there's the Florida Laws and Rules Examination, which is called FLAIR for short. The FLAIR is a computer-based test consisting of 50 multiple choice questions, but only 40 are scored. You'll be given 60 minutes to complete the exam, and you can find a study packet online to help you prepare, and we'll include a link to the study guide in the video's description. In New Jersey, aspiring psychologists will have to take the New Jersey jurisprudence exam. This is a 25-question test covering laws and regulations relevant to psychology practice in the state. The questions are true or false. Finally, in Massachusetts, you'll need to take the Massachusetts jurisprudence examination. This is a short exam of only 20 multiple choice questions that you'll have 1 hour to complete, and you need to score at least 70% to pass, which is 14 questions. If you're hoping to practice psychology in New York or Illinois, you'll be happy to find out there's no state-specific exam in either one. You will only need to take the EPPP. Now, you have your license, but you'll need to maintain it. After passing the EPPP and your individual state's exam, you'll need to wait to hear back from the state you plan to live and practice in. But even after you obtain your license, that's not the end of the process because you'll need to keep it up to date. Clinical psychologists in every state will need to go through a few steps to maintain their license so they can continue practicing. Though the process varies slightly from state to state, generally here's what you'll need to do. For starters, in almost every state within the US, a psychologist's license needs to be renewed every 2 years, except for in New York State, where you'll only need to renew your license every 3 years. Within these 2 or 3 year renewal periods, you'll also need to take classes that are called continuing education or professional development courses. The number of hours of continuing education you'll need also varies by state, but generally falls between 20 and 40 hours. So for example, the state of California requires psychologists to complete 36 hours of approved continuing education during each 2-year licensure period. Finally, you'll need to pay a fee each time you renew your license. This fee typically costs between $200 and $500, with Florida's renewal fee being one of the most expensive at $610 every 2 years. Each state is different and has its own fees, continuing education requirements, and license renewal guidelines, so it's always wise to do your own research depending on which state you want to practice in. But let's take a look at the specific requirements psychologists need to maintain their licenses in just a few of the most popular states for immigrants. Let's start with California. Psychologists here are required to complete 36 hours of approved continuing education every 2 years. The renewal fee is $530 and can be paid online. We'll include a link in the description below provided by the California Board of Psychology explaining how to renew your license. Turning our focus to Florida, license remain valid for 2 years. In addition to 35 general hours of continuing education, psychologists must complete 2 hours of medical errors training and 3 hours of ethics and Florida psychology law during each renewal cycle. Additionally, every 6 years, 2 hours of domestic violence training is required, making a total of 40 hours. The renewal fee in Florida, as I mentioned, is $610. Now in Illinois, psychology licenses expire on September 30th of every even-numbered year. Renewal entails a fee along with documentation proving completion of at least 24 hours of continuing education over the previous 2 years, and the renewal fee is $160. In Massachusetts, licenses must be renewed by June 30th of every even-numbered year. Psychologists are required to complete 20 hours of continuing education during each 2-year renewal period, and the fee is $270. Transitioning to New Jersey, licenses require renewal every 2 years at a cost of $300. All psychology licenses in New Jersey expire on June 30th of odd-numbered years. To renew, psychologists must obtain 40 continuing education credits. Next, in New York, psychologists must renew their license every 3 years, completing a total of 36 hours of approved continuing education courses, and the fee is $179. Finally, in Texas, license renewal is required every 2 years, along with completion of 40 hours of continuing education within that period, and the renewal fee is $424. But please keep in mind that all of this information is subject to change, so always double check with your state's licensing board to make sure that you have the most up-to-date information when it comes time to renew your license. Now you know it's possible to become licensed as a clinical psychologist. Even though the process can seem daunting, it's definitely worth it because in the end, you'll be able to continue your career in the US. It will be more rewarding to be able to utilize your skills and training, and you'll almost certainly be earning more money than you would by working in a job that doesn't require a license. Thank you, and see you in the next video.